Hey guys, tonight, we're slipping into a world where sleep is a myth. The line between justice and madness is razor thin, and the only thing more cursed than the witches is you. You're a witch hunter in 17th century Europe, dragging your aching feet through mud-caked alleyways, your eyes bloodshot from days without rest, and every creak of wood or owl hoot sends a fresh spike of panic down your spine. You smell like smoke and sweat, and something vaguely medicinal that might have been holy water, or someone's desperate attempt at soap. You're not sleeping tonight, again. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time, witching hour optional. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your shift technically started 5 nights ago. Not that it ended. You'd thought maybe this job would come with a bunk, or at least some stew. Instead, you got handed a crooked torch, a pamphlet on signs of satanic presence, and told to report any unbaptized cats. You haven't blinked in what feels like an hour. That's fine. Blinking is how witches sneak up on you. You trudge through the frost-bitten village square, your boots crunching over dried herbs scattered by someone's aunt, who swore fennel keeps demons at bay. You remember because you interrogated her 3 nights ago. She offered you tea. You nearly cried. Historians still argue whether witch hunters were government agents, freelance zealots, or just opportunists in funny hats. But whatever the role on paper right now, you're just a sleep-deprived sack of nerves constantly one confession away from throwing yourself down a well. The bell tolls. Midnight. Again. Your bones vibrate like tuning forks. You've memorized the sound of every door hinge in town. That one, Widow Martha's back door. She boils goat bones for soup. Smells like someone hexed a shoe. Could be innocent. Probably isn't. Nothing is anymore. Did you hear that? No, seriously, was that a scream? Or just a dream memory? That's the tricky part. When your body stops sleeping, your brain does it without permission. Just little fragments, hallucinations baked into reality, like raisins in sad bread. One moment you're walking past the baker's shop, the next you swear the oven blinked. You convince yourself it's fine. Sleep is for people who don't need to protect the realm from evil. You hold up the lantern and squint into the fog. The air smells like wet wool and moldy scrolls. A shape moves. Your grip tightens. It's a cow. It looks at you with judgmental eyes. You apologize to the cow. Funny thing is, this is technically your night off. But the village elder heard someone chanting near the river. So guess who got volunteered? You, the guy with a record for exceptional nocturnal vigilance. Translation: you once caught a girl sleepwalking and panicked so hard, you accidentally blessed her dog. Your record's impeccable, though 8 suspected witches in the last 2 months. Sure, 3 were just herbalists, and 1 might have been a mime, but who's counting? Not the villagers. They're sleeping soundly, satisfied that someone's out here protecting them from invisible curses and suspicious bread shapes. Your brain hiccups. You see a flash of light in the trees, probably just moonlight, or witchfire, or your left eye giving up. You can't tell anymore. Remember the time you saw a woman sneeze and immediately summoned the blacksmith for backup good times. There's something surreal about the silence between owl calls. It stretches, yawns, and presses in on your skull like a headache that hums hymns. You don't even flinch when you hear footsteps behind you. It's just your own paranoia chasing its tail. But then snap. A twig. Definitely real. You whip around. Nothing. Just fog thick and slow like bad soup. Your heart stutters. Was that someone watching? A figure in the trees. You shout a warning. Your voice cracks like a burnt scroll. Still nothing. You walk faster now. Your feet drag like they're stuck in syrup. You wish you were dreaming. You probably are. Somewhere deep down, you suspect this job isn't about saving souls. It's about control. About keeping people afraid enough to behave. But you're too tired to think that hard. You reach the chapel steps, breathing hard. You sit, or collapse. Hard to say. You whisper a prayer, though you're not sure to whom. Maybe just to the gods of sleep. or to the cat you definitely falsely accused last week. Above you, the moon stares down, unblinking. Lucky moon. Morning doesn't come like a sunrise. It stumbles in bleary and slow, like it forgot to set an alarm. You haven't slept, obviously. You're not even sure you've sat still for more than a blink. The wooden bench outside the chapel has engraved its pattern into your backside, and you're nursing what might be either a fever dream or a caffeine withdrawal. And considering coffee hasn't been invented yet where you are, it's probably the latter. The village is waking up, kind of. Curtains twitch. Someone rings a bell for breakfast. You, however, get a summons, scrawled on rough parchment in inky panic, urgent, barn, possible demon. Of course, it's the barn. You limp your way over joints, creaking louder than the door you're about to shove open. Inside, it's dim and hay-scented, but no fire. That's good. Demon-free for now. A group huddles by a goat. The goat looks bored. Next to it, a farmer points at a shadowy corner, muttering about a noise no human throat could have made. You investigate and find a rooster stuck in a barrel. Yes, that's your big emergency. But the problem isn't the rooster. It's the look in the villagers' eyes, like they need this to be something. Something evil. Something to justify their fear. Witch hunting thrives not on evidence, but on exhaustion. And you're Exhibit A. Historians still argue whether witch hunters were true believers or sleep-deprived paranoiacs with a badge. But when your dreams start showing up while you're awake, who's to say what's real anymore? You stagger back outside. The sun hits your face like an insult. You haven't blinked since you left the barn. Your eyes are grainy. Your tongue tastes like candle wax. You briefly wonder if you're cursed. But then again, everyone thinks that, eventually. Comes with the job. Speaking of which, remember Agnes, the midwife? You passed her house on the way here. She's been acting strange. Translation, she owns a cat and doesn't attend church. Also, she once cured a rash using moss and garlic, which is either herbal wisdom or devil's work, depending on how judgmental you're feeling that day. You knock on her door. No answer. Of course. You push it open because suspicion equals probable cause in your line of work. Inside it smells like lavender and wet parchment. An odd combination. There's a stack of dried herbs, a pestle and mortar, a scroll about anatomy that looks shockingly scientific. You pause. This doesn't feel like evil. It feels organized, thoughtful. You pocket the scroll anyway. Evidence, you tell yourself, though part of you knows it's just curiosity. Suddenly, a creak behind you. Agnes is back. She's holding a basket of root vegetables and looking at you like she expected better. She doesn't scream. Doesn't protest, just sighs. You want to accuse her of sorcery. Instead, you blurt out, "Have you seen any crows lately?" "What?" She stares. You clear your throat. "Sorry, haven't slept in a while." She nods slowly and offers you a potato. You take it. That potato is the kindest gesture anyone's made toward you in days. You walk back into the square, holding it like a sacred relic. The villagers are eyeing you again, expecting you to declare something or someone dangerous. You raise the potato. This was the source you mumble, false alarm. They nod like that makes perfect sense. This is your reality now. You chase shadows, wave root vegetables in the air, and pretend you're still in control. And yet deep down, part of you wants to find something real. Something dark enough to justify the sleepless nights and the whispered fears. Because if there's no actual evil out there, what are you even doing? You sit by the well and munch the potato raw. It's terrible, but it reminds you you're still human. Kind of. You close your eyes for one moment, only to jolt awake a second later to someone screaming. The blacksmith's horse just spoke Latin. Of course it did. You don't even question it anymore. A talking horse, sure. Why not? You haven't slept in so long your brain is basically a soup of candle smoke and vague terror. At this point, the absurd is routine. You drag your aching limbs to the blacksmith stables, where a crowd has already gathered like flies to madness. The horse, for the record, is not talking. It's whinnying. But someone swears they heard it say, "Dominus vobiscum." You squint at the animal. It blinks at you deeply unbothered, maybe even smug. The blacksmith is swearing up and down that his mare was cursed. He claims her eyes glowed red last night. You ask what he'd been drinking, and he says nothing but turnip mead, which frankly sounds like a curse in liquid form. You make a big show of inspecting the horse, checking its hooves, whispering a Latin phrase or two, just to see if it responds. It doesn't. Of course it doesn't. But the villagers don't care. They want drama. They want evil wrapped in horsehair and paranoia. You declare the horse absolved, mostly to avoid it being burned alive. The crowd grumbles. No one's satisfied. Historians still debate how much of witch panic was driven by mass psychosis versus deliberate manipulation by local authorities. But you know firsthand how contagious fear is. One whisper about a goat sneezing at midnight, and suddenly the whole village is confessing to flying on spoons and dancing with frogs. Your role isn't just to investigate, it's to perform. You're part detective, part priest, part circus act. And right now the act is collapsing under the weight of your eye bags and cracked sanity. Back in your quarters, if you can call a splintery cot and a rusty chamber pot quarters, you try to nap. You really do. But every creak in the floorboards feels like an incantation. Every whisper outside the window feels aimed at you. So instead, you journal. You've been keeping notes, not because anyone asked you to, but because writing it down helps. A record of strange things, that time the baker swore her bread rose too fast and blamed a pixie. The child who spoke in rhymes for 3 straight days. The nun who dreamt of fire and snakes and swore it was a warning. You also note the weird one. Remember this. The woman who claimed her shadow was trying to strangle her. You didn't believe it then, but lately your own shadow seems clingier than usual. Follows just a touch too close. Maybe it's the lantern light playing tricks. Or maybe, nope, stop, don't go there. You shake your head, force your hand to steady, and write down something logical instead. Like too many villagers eating moldy rye. Which is true, ergot poisoning is a thing. Hallucinations, seizures. It explains a lot. Historians have floated that theory for centuries. But logic rarely survives long in your line of work. A sharp knock at your door. You groan actually groan because you already know it's not someone offering help or sleep or soup. It's a boy from the inn, breathless and pale. Sir, he says there's a woman floating above the well. You sigh, deeply, not even surprised. By the time you get there, she's not floating. She's just standing weirdly close to the edge, arms outstretched, whispering. You recognize her Eleonora. Wears too much blue, smells like fennel. Everyone thinks she's odd. You ask what she's doing? She turns slowly and says, I was listening to the water sing. You stare at her. She stares back. There's no law against poetic water appreciation. But you feel the villagers watching you, waiting for you to declare something ominous. So you nod solemnly and say, we'll observe for signs, which means I'm too tired for this. Let's pretend I did something. That night, or what passes for night, when the sky is just different shades of bruised gray, you sit in the chapel and try not to hallucinate. The candle flickers. Your shadow flickers with it. You scowl at it, daring it to act up. It behaves, for now. Your boots squelch through mud that should have been snow this time of year. The sky leaks drizzle, the kind that soaks you without even making a sound. Perfect witch hunting weather, really. Oppressively damp, drearily gray, and absolutely miserable. You yank your cloak tighter, though it's already more sponge than fabric. A farmer flagged you down at dawn, well more like just after the rooster screamed in your skull, and insisted his crops had been hexed. You asked what made him so sure. He pointed at a carrot. A curved carrot. You stared at it, then at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Still here, you are standing in the middle of a half-dead field, while he gestures dramatically to vegetables that do look off. Twisted roots, browning leaves, one potato that vaguely resembles a screaming face. He swears his soil is cursed, that his cow began mooing backward, whatever that means. You kneel, scrape some earth into your fingers. It smells normal. But you remember something you once read in a monastery. Some monks believed sulfur in the soil was proof of hell bubbling up beneath. Historians still argue whether those monks were scientists ahead of their time, or just deeply sleep-deprived like you. Still, you play along. You make the sign of the cross with a turnip. It's not standard protocol, but it makes the farmer feel better. And honestly, it's kind of satisfying. Back in the village, people are whispering again. This time it's about the miller's daughter. She started speaking in what sounds like Latin, but is probably just clever gibberish. You go see her expecting the usual dramatic moaning and some conveniently timed seizures. Instead, she's sitting quietly, eyes shut, murmuring phrases that make your skin crawl, not because they're sinister, but because you recognize them. They're verses from a banned text, the Malleus Fragmentum, a lost witch-hunting companion scroll that supposedly caused madness in anyone who read it. You only saw it once, burned immediately. But how would she know it? You lean in. Where did you hear those words? She opens her eyes slowly, smiles, and says, I dreamt them. From the trees. Okay, nope, time to walk that off. You stumble into the tavern for something hot ale broth, molten lava, whatever's on hand. The barkeep eyes you with that look of worried pity he's been giving you more and more. He slides you something steaming. It smells like roasted shoe, but tastes passable. The tavern's got its usual suspects. Old men trying to outdo each other's superstitions. Women knitting hex-warding scarves, children daring each other to poke the fireplace and summon spirits. Just another Wednesday. You half listen as a story gets retold for the 100th time. The tale of the Midnight Riders witches, who allegedly fly only under new moons looking for unlocked doors and lonely souls. They ride cats, apparently. Full-grown cats, which you're pretty sure defies physics. Still, there's something about this one old man's voice. It's dry as parchment, and somehow full of dread that makes the room fall quiet. He says he once saw a midnight rider perched atop the chapel roof, whispering into the bell. You resist the urge to scoff, mostly because a part of you, the part running on 3 hours of sleep, spread across 4 days, believes him. Later, you do a sweep of the chapel. Nothing's off except for a single candle left burning in the apse. You snuff it out. It flares blue for a split second. That's odd. You tell yourself it's just bad tallow. Then you hear it. The bell, ringing itself. You don't run, because witch hunters aren't supposed to run. You stride with authority. So you stride. Briskly. Toward the tower. The rope isn't moving. No breeze. But the bell keeps ringing low and slow. Almost like a heartbeat. Almost like it stops. You don't sleep that night. Again. Your journal entry just reads bell. Blue flame. Gibberish girl. Turnip cross. Worked question mark. Your handwriting is starting to tilt sideways. That's not good. You ask the priest if he's noticed anything strange lately. He says the pews creak more than usual, and the baptismal font is growing moss on the inside. You ask if moss is a sign of demonic presence. He says it's probably just humidity. You don't press it, but the whispers are getting louder. The villagers are looking at you with a mix of reverence and fear. You're starting to wonder if they'll turn on you if you don't find someone to burn. You glance in the mirror. You don't look like a hero. You look like a man haunted by a turnip. Sleep deprivation does funny things to your mind. Time bends. Walls breathe. A dog barking at a shadow becomes a divine warning. And when you're a witch hunter already tuned to signs, omens, and barely remembered Latin chants, every hallucination has the potential to be real. You wake up with your boots still on. Actually, wake is a strong word. You blink into awareness while sitting upright in someone's hayloft. Not your hayloft. Not your hay. Definitely not your goat currently licking your forehead. You're not even mad, just confused. Apparently, you wandered out in the middle of the night looking for the sound, whatever that means. The farmer's son found you mumbling about lunar thresholds and salt in the seams of the earth. You can't tell if that was something you read or something you invented in a half-dream. Historians still argue whether many of the most infamous 16th century witch trials were driven by actual religious zeal if they were just the feverish ramblings of exhausted paranoid men on power trips. You're beginning to lean hard into feverish ramblings. You drag yourself back to the town square, where the magistrate is waiting, of course, with another complaint. The blacksmith's anvil has cracked clean in half. Suspicious maybe. You ask if he was forging anything unusual. Just horseshoes, he says. But he glances to the side, like someone hiding a sin. You poke around his workshop and find it a tiny iron charm shaped like a snake swallowing its own tail. The Ouroboros, not your average blacksmith trinket. You lift it with tongs and ask, where did this come from? He won't say. Just mutters something about a woman in the forest and a price he didn't want to pay. You want to push him harder, but your knees wobble, and you realize you haven't eaten anything that wasn't liquid or charred in days. You grab a loaf of barley bread, nearly break a tooth on it, and chew anyway. Dry crumbs, slightly moldy, feels like justice. Outside, children are drawing chalk sigils on the cobblestones, laughing. You ask what they're playing. They call it Witch's Maze. You freeze. That game didn't exist until a week ago. You'd know. They say it just came to them. From dreams. And the cat. What cat? They point to the chapel roof. You follow their gaze. Nothing's there. Of course. You run your hand through your hair and feel something gritty. Ash. You don't remember fire. You ask a girl if she's seen you today. She says you passed by at sunrise, whistling and tossing bones into the fountain. Fantastic. You find the local healer. Old half-blind, always smells of garlic and crushed sage. And ask if she knows any remedies for sleeplessness and curse-related confusion. She says yes, then smacks you on the forehead with a bundle of herbs and tells you to drink beetroot water and avoid moonlight for 3 days. Moonlight avoidance isn't exactly practical for a man who chases witches by night, but you nod and accept the water. It tastes like wet dirt and disappointment. Still, you feel a little better. Probably placebo. That night, you visit the graveyard. Not for fun, mind you, someone swears a grave dug itself open. You find the site. Yep, open grave. But no sign of digging, no footprints, no dirt piles, just a gaping hole and a slightly soggy hymn book lying nearby. It's open to a psalm about vengeance. You shine your lantern into the grave. No body, only a smooth, unmarked stone resting where the coffin should be. You touch it. It hums. You hum back. Not on purpose. That's alarming. You back away slowly and chalk it up to cumulative stress. Maybe even mass hysteria. Historians still debate how many witch panics were just that collective madness incubated by superstition and chronic insomnia. You write everything down. Your handwriting looks like spider legs now. The words stone, hummed, psalm of vengeance, beat water, ipushura. You try to sleep in your own bed that night. You really try. But just as your eyelids begin to drop, you hear whispering. Not from outside. Inside. Inside your pillow. You sit up. The whispering stops. You press your ear to the linen again. Nothing. Then she sees you. You throw the pillow across the room, and it thuds like it landed on something solid. You stare at it for 10 full minutes. Eventually, you flip it over. Just stuffing. No secret witch. No hidden bone. But the whisper lingers in your ear like a song you can't unhear. You write down pillow voice. Suggest new bedding. You've officially passed the point of distinguishing dreams from reality. You think you're in the church attic, but the floor feels like stone, and the wind rattling the walls whispers in iambic pentameter. Classic curse behavior. Either that, or the local mead's stronger than it looks. You open your notebook. Yes. The one where you log witch signs and possibly real hallucinations, and see pages filled with ink you don't remember writing. One entry just reads, "The girl with salt eyes watches from the rafters." Another, "Don't trust the juggler." You stare at that last one a while. There's no juggler in town. At least not that you know of. You're starting to wonder if the curse isn't coming from the witches, but from the job itself. Historically, witch hunters were often self-appointed, poorly trained, and heavily sleep-deprived men who were constantly exposed to fear superstition and deeply anxious townsfolk whispering about shadowy goats and cursed wind sound familiar. Tonight there's another summons. The cobbler's son has gone mute after visiting a spring in the woods. You don't want to go. Every fiber of your being screams nap, but duty. You grab your coat, your crucifix, and your half-burned lantern and shuffle toward the tree line. The forest is quieter than it should be. No birds, no bugs, just the occasional creak of trees like they're holding their breath. You pass a toad sitting on a stone. It doesn't blink. You say evening. It croaks your name. You pretend that didn't happen. You find the spring easily. It's glowing faintly. Definitely not normal. The boy is nearby, curled up and silent. When you ask what happened, he just shakes his head and draws a spiral into the dirt. You ask again. Same spiral, just bigger. You try to carry him home, but halfway there he runs ahead of you and disappears behind a boulder. You follow, and surprise, he's gone. No trace. No footprints. Just one word scratched into the moss. Enough. Historians still argue whether documented possessions or bewitchments were real or psychosomatic symptoms of extreme kefir malnutrition or exposure to environmental toxins. You're now willing to believe it could be all three. Plus insomnia. You feel like your brain's been replaced with boiled cabbage. Back in the village, the baker hands you a loaf shaped like a witch's hat. Just for fun, she says. You take it with a hollow laugh and chew a corner. It's somehow spicy and bitter at once, like cinnamon soaked in regret. You don't even ask why. Someone lights a torch near the stalks. The townspeople are gathering again. This time for an emergency inquisition. Apparently a woman sneezed and all the candles in her house blew out. Now she's under suspicion. You walk up to her cottage. She's holding a broom and looks more irritated than frightened. You ask about the candles. She rolls her eyes. Draft in the chimney. You test this with your lantern. Sure enough, poof, out it goes. Not witchcraft, just poor insulation. But the crowd doesn't care. They want justice. Or at least entertainment. You stand between her and the angry mob and say, "No witch here. Just bad architecture." They grumble. Someone throws a carrot. It hits your forehead. You consider keeping it. You are low on vegetables. Later that night, you find yourself at the chapel again. You sit in the pew, head in your hands. The candlelight dances. You close your eyes for just a second, and when you open them, the altar cloth has changed color. It was white. Now it's blood red. You touch it. It feels warm, pulsing. You bolt upright and knock over a candelabra. Wax splashes on your boots. No fire, just embarrassment. You flee outside, gasping. You need sleep. You deserve sleep. You swear to take a break tomorrow. Absolutely no witch hunting. Just you, your cot, and maybe a root vegetable or two. But as you step into the street, the wind changes, brings with it a whisper. One more. One more. You look up. There on the roof of the apothecary sits a black cat. It stares directly at you and smiles. By this point, you've accepted that reality has slipped sideways. Like a tavern stool, with one short leg, your grip on what's actually happening wobbles with every passing hour. You might be cursed, you might be hallucinating, or you might just be profoundly, dangerously overtired. It's hard to tell, especially now, with the cat. Yes, that cat, the one still perched on the apothecary roof, staring into your soul, like it's memorizing your childhood secrets. You blink, it blinks back. You blink again. It's gone, just vanished. Not even a tuft of fur or the faint scent of sulfur. You return to your quarters, determined not to chase feline ghosts tonight. But sleep. Still not an option. Every time you lie down, your mind replays every scream, every accusation, every candle that blew out mysteriously when someone sneezed too hard. Your brain is now a carousel of nonsense, and you're the unwilling ticket holder. Historically, many witch hunters suffered from what modern psychology might label mass psychogenic illness, a shared psychological state, fueled by fear, superstition, and extreme fatigue. When the mind believes it's surrounded by danger, it creates danger. Like that time you were convinced your shadow moved on its own. You laugh nervously. Then you glance at the wall, just in case. You wander into the village again. It's moonless and misty. Perfect horror movie lighting. Just wonderful. The tavern's still open because nothing fuels community hysteria like a strong ale and a tale of flying grandmothers. Inside you find two farmers arguing over whether witches are born with tails or grow them after their first ritual. One of them is making a very passionate diagram in spilled beer. You try to reason with them, mention that no historical record has confirmed tail growth in witches, but they wave you off. You're too tired to see the truth, one of them says. He's not wrong. You just weren't expecting the local turnip vendor to become a conspiracy theorist. Back outside, something strange happens. A woman approaches you, not screaming, not shaking, just calm. She tells you her daughter's been having dreams where she sees people's auras. Blue for sadness, red for anger, and this part's new green for definitely cursed. Naturally, she asks you to come see her daughter. Naturally, you agree. Because even though you're running on brain fumes and stale bread, your curse bingo card isn't full yet. At the cottage, the girl is drawing on the walls. Not random scribbles, detailed maps. Of the town. With little stick figures standing in specific locations. She tells you which ones are safe and which ones aren't. You ask how she knows. She says the green glow whispers it to me. Fringe tidbit. In parts of Eastern Europe during the 16th century, children were sometimes believed to be witch detectors because of their supposed purity and sight. Some towns even tried to train them. You're beginning to think that might be what's happening here. Except instead of training, this girl's been left to draw on the walls like a prophetic raccoon. You ask her to point to someone she thinks is cursed. She walks to the window and gestures at you. Ah, lovely. You chuckle, scratch your chin, and say something dismissive like, well, I've been under a lot of stress. But inside, a part of you nods solemnly. Yeah, makes sense. Of course, you would be the one carrying the curse all along. She gives you a drawing. It's a crude portrait, big eyes, messy hair, holding a lantern. Definitely you. But behind your figure is a shadowy shape with long claws and no face. You thank her awkwardly. Leave the house. Walk into the fog. No destination in mind, just the vague hope that a good walk will exorcise whatever existential dread is now gnawing at your spleen. Historians still argue whether witch trials were more about religious fervor, community control, or personal vendettas. You're starting to think the real fuel behind it all was exhaustion. Everyone was just so tired of strange illnesses, bad crops, and having no one to blame but themselves. So they made witches, and then made you to hunt them. You find yourself at the edge of the woods again, the same spring where the mute boy disappeared. The water's still glowing. You sit down, toss in a pebble. The ripple looks off, not just spreading outward, spelling something. You lean closer. It says rest. You blink. Gone. But it's enough to finally convince you. Tomorrow you rest. Unless the black cat shows up again. Then all bets are off. You wake up to the sound of bells. Not gentle church bells or town square announcements. No, these are the panicked clangs of witch, the sort of bells that mean someone's goat fainted weirdly, or a loaf of bread rose in the shape of a skull. You sit up, boots still on drool on your collar, and a sense of dread parked firmly on your chest. So much for rest. You trudge out the door, dragging your lantern behind you like a toddler's stuffed animal. Townspeople are gathering in a thick, buzzing clump in front of the weaver's house. Apparently, her husband sneezed himself unconscious, and the cause is obviously her newly dyed blue cloak. You stare at the crowd, and in your most gravelly voice, mutter, "It's allergies." They ignore you. Someone yells that her sheep have been bleating in Morse code. Another swears they saw her walking backward last Thursday. And that can only mean one thing, packed with the devil. You consider just lying down in the mud. But instead you do what a proper, deeply sleep-deprived witch hunter does. You raise your hand, clear your throat, and announce, "Let's test her." The air stills. You take a rusty scale from your bag. Yes, that bag. The one filled with very scientific witch-detecting tools. like weighted toads, and a mirror with a suspicious crack. You place a rock on one side, the woman's shoe on the other, and declare that if they balance, she's innocent. They do, barely. You declare her innocent. The crowd mutters dissatisfied, but momentarily pacified. She stares at you with a look that is part gratitude. Part. What in the name of Saint Hedwig is happening? You don't answer. Because now your vision's starting to tunnel, and you're fairly certain you just heard the weaver's sheep say run. One mainstream historical fact: witch hunters, especially during peak European hysteria, late 16th to 17th centuries, often relied on absurd physical tests that confirmed guilt no matter the outcome. Float in water witch. Sink and drown, also witch. And possibly a funeral on Tuesday. You stumble away, determined to finally find somewhere dark and horizontal. But something tugs at you. Maybe guilt. Maybe superstition. Maybe just that terrible drawing the Aura girl gave you. You head toward the chapel. Again. Inside, the light is dim. The red altar cloth has returned to white. You breathe a little easier. Maybe things are stabilizing. Maybe all you needed was a moment of peace. A flicker of faith. A snack. The door creaks. The black cat walks in. You sigh. Not again. It walks up the aisle, stops at your feet, looks up, and speaks. Not in words, don't be silly, but its meow sounds uncannily like stop. You raise your eyebrows. Stop? What? Another meow. A little more urgent. You kneel down. Am I cursed? Silence. Then the cat climbs into your lap and curls up. Well, you sit there for a long time. Minutes, hours, who knows? The cat purrs warm and heavy. You don't dare move. And then you sleep, right there on the cold chapel floor, with a possibly demonic but weirdly helpful cat acting as your blanket. Later, a monk finds you. You're snoring. You haven't looked this peaceful in months. The witch panic dies down in the coming days. No one gets possessed. No goats combust. The Aura girl switches to drawing clouds instead of creepy maps. Even the sheep behave. For a while. You hang up your lantern, retire your toad. You start sleeping again, dreaming of ordinary things, like bread that doesn't scream, and villagers who stop blaming their hay fever on sorcery. Historians still argue whether witch hunters ever truly believed what they preached, or if the whole thing was performative politics wrapped in robes and fear. But you know the truth. You were just tired, so very deeply apocalyptically tired. And now at last you're not. So now, as the mist clears, and the cat purrs gently beside you, let your breath slow. Let your mind drift from the candlelit chaos and whispered curses. Forget the cracked mirrors, the twitchy sheep, and the girl with the spiral drawings. Instead, picture a quiet chapel, dust motes, hanging in golden beams of sunlight, and you wrapped in warmth and silence, with nothing left to hunt or fear or fix. You're safe. The village is calm. The bells have stopped ringing. The cat's purring becomes the hum of a distant lullaby, and your heavy eyelids finally surrender. There are no more witches tonight, no more trials, just rest, just dreams, and maybe, just maybe, a very old toad, who still checks on you sometimes from the garden. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we journey back thousands of years into the arid winds of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates cradle not just civilization's beginnings, but also humanity's earliest fear, being taken over by something else. You're barefoot on cracked earth. The air is heavy with incense and suspicion. A goat sneezes and suddenly everyone is on edge. Why? Because here even a sneeze could open the door to demonic possession. Yeah, you're gonna need more than a handkerchief. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just visiting Mesopotamia. You are a Mesopotamian. You wake before dawn to the bleating of sheep and the groaning of your joints from a brick bed. And your first concern, that a spirit entered your body while you slept. Totally normal. Because in your world, the unseen is everywhere. Evil spirits don't just lurk in shadows, they creep into your ears, hide in your stomach, or sneak through your mouth when you yawn. Possession isn't a rare horror flick plot twist. It's Tuesday. You step into the street, with eyes low muttering protective phrases under your breath. Not because you're polite, but because the ancient demon Alu might be hanging around. He has no mouth, no lips, and he loves to haunt people in their sleep. Wake up gasping. That's Alu. He's basically the original sleep paralysis demon, complete with fan art carved into clay tablets. There's a scribal priest in the city who makes a killing selling anti-demon charms. One of his most popular amulets features Pazuzu, yes, the same demon the Exorcist movie later borrowed. But back then, Pazuzu was kind of a double agent. He looked horrifying lion claws, scorpion tail, and a permanently bad hair day. But ironically, he was often invoked to scare off other demons. It's like hiring Freddy Krueger as your security guard. Oh, and about that sneeze earlier. Mesopotamians believed that sneezing was your soul trying to escape. Say bless you, or risk spiritual jailbreak. Protective rituals were baked into daily life. Clay tablets list dozens of incantations to prevent demonic entry through the mouth and nose, or even via an evil glance. One charm recommended sleeping with a circle of flour around your bed, either to confuse the demon, or give him a light snack and distract him. Historians still argue whether these beliefs stemmed purely from spiritual fears, or whether they were ancient attempts at explaining epilepsy, mental illness, or even asthma. Because when you don't have MRI machines, or Google, everything looks like a curse. You're not alone in your paranoia. Whole families gather before big events, births, weddings, new house construction to recite protection spells from clay scrolls written in Sumerian or Akkadian. They even have a demon-specific flowchart. If you vomited, it might be the ghost of someone drowned. If you heard whispers in the night, maybe it was Utuku, a vengeful spirit who forgot to RSVP to the afterlife. The worst part: there's no privacy. If you exhibit signs of possession like shaking, screaming, or saying rude things about your neighbor's goat, you're paraded to the exorcist. His toolkit includes blessed water incense and chanted texts, but also, just to be safe, some loud banging pots to frighten the spirit out of you. Imagine having a panic attack and someone smacks a cymbal in your face. Comforting. There's a fringe theory that some of these rituals doubled as early psychological therapy, but even if that's true, they came with pressure. If you failed to protect yourself and got possessed, it wasn't just your problem, it was your family's shame. Kind of like being the only guy who left the city gate open and let a war god walk in. So as you walk home that evening, eyes scanning every flicker of shadow, you clutch your tiny carved figurine, a squat little demon wearing a belt of snakes. Protection, they say. But deep down you wonder, what if it's already inside you? You wake up in Egypt, now technically still ancient times, but the scenery has changed. The River Nile whispers nearby the sandstone walls of your mud brick home, hum with morning heat. And your first thought is, where did I put that amulet? Because in this golden kingdom of pyramids and polished gods, the dead don't always stay politely in their tombs. Your name is Nefru, you think, or maybe Menhotep. It doesn't really matter, because either way, you're expected to guard your soul like it's the family cow. This is a land where the afterlife is meticulously planned, and where people go to absurd lengths to make sure no spirit hijacks their body en route. You don't leave the house without your Wedjot eye. That's the famous Eye of Horus. It's not just a fashion choice. That stylized eyeball is supposed to repel evil spirits. There's also your scarab beetle necklace. Cute, yes, but also engraved with magical phrases to prevent your heart from tattling on you in the afterlife. Ancient Egyptian therapy, basically. Oh, and you've got spells. Loads of them. The Book of the Dead isn't actually one book. It's a mix and match of funerary instructions and spirit-banishing hacks, often tailored for each soul. Some of the richer folks had these spells painted right into their tombs, just in case their ghost self needed a quick cheat sheet. Possession in ancient Egypt wasn't always by evil spirits, though. Sometimes it was the souls of the improperly buried, lost angry, and looking for a human ride. You had to be really careful during childbirth illness or funerals. That's when the veil between worlds thinned, and ghosts had free Uber passes. One widely whispered fear was that a dead person could cling to the living if their burial rites weren't done correctly. So naturally, every household had someone obsessed with ritual purity. You're not allowed to touch anything unclean before performing ceremonies, which sounds fine, until you remember that unclean includes things like onions, fish, or accidentally stepping in donkey poop, which, good luck avoiding in ancient Egypt. To combat all that, you attend monthly purification ceremonies. Priests splash blessed water, burn myrrh and frankincense, and chant invocations to keep spirits off your scent. You're standing there, arms lifted, trying to pretend the smoke doesn't sting your eyes, while someone in the corner shakes a sistrum, a rattling instrument that supposedly drives away spirits and bad vibes. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were religious necessity or elite social performance, sort of like saying prayers and flexing your spiritual wealth at the same time. After all, poor farmers didn't always get the deluxe ghost blocking package. Then there's the weird stuff, like crocodile dung mixed with honey, worn on the skin to keep spirits from entering through your pores. It's sticky, it's gross, and somehow it became a thing. Or the use of hair braids soaked in natron, a kind of salty baking soda that people wore during sleep just in case their dreams turned into ghost invites. You remember your uncle, rest his desiccated soul, who swore he once saw a neighbor possessed. The man began screaming in Akkadian. Which problem 1, this is Egypt. Problem 2, no one even knew what Akkadian was. They wrapped the man in linen, splashed him with water from the sacred lake, and read a spell that mentioned binding the mouth of the ghost. Apparently it worked. Or at least he stopped yelling and started just aggressively gardening instead. And here's the kicker. Not all spirits were malicious. Some were just confused. Maybe a mother looking for her lost child, or a servant who thought they still had chores to do. The ancient Egyptians didn't see possession as purely evil. It could be tragic, accidental, or even protective. One papyrus describes a woman possessed by her grandmother, who kept rearranging her home's altar. So yes, ghost micromanagement. As the sun dips below the horizon, you light a cone of scented wax on your head. It melts slowly, releasing perfume and warding off any roaming spirits. And you say a short prayer to Anubis, just in case he's listening. Because tomorrow someone's being buried, and that means tonight, the dead are wandering. You sleep with your amulets close, just in case. You're sweating in Mesopotamia now. Not just from the heat, though. Yes, the Tigris and Euphrates region is basically a giant clay oven, but from sheer nervous anticipation. Because tonight there's something wrong with you. Your head aches, your limbs twitch, and your neighbor keeps side-eyeing you like you've been possessed by a Giddim the Angry Dead. In this part of the ancient world, sickness and misfortune aren't just biological bad luck. They're often seen as proof that some restless spirit has taken up residence inside your body, like an unwelcome Airbnb guest. And unlike in Egypt, where spirits might hover or linger here, they fully move in. Symptoms of possession. Screaming randomly convulsions, babbling strange words, or just looking a little off. You're not quite yourself. You're you. Plus something else. So what do your friends do? Naturally, they drag you half-conscious and foaming a little to the nearest exorcist. But don't picture a guy in black robes shouting the power of Enlil compels you. No, this is more clinical, more bureaucratic. You're now in the hands of an Ashipu, a ritual specialist trained in the sacred art of ghost eviction and evil spirit negotiations. He arrives with his assistant and a tablet under one arm. Not an iPad, an actual cuneiform tablet. Written on it, a mix of prayers, charms, and instructions that might include burning resin, sacrificing a goat, or whispering threats to the invisible presence currently giving you night sweats. He sets up shop by your bedside, arranges some statues of gods like Ea and Shamash, sprinkles consecrated flour in a circle and begins his chant. And then he spits. Yes, really. Spitting was one of the techniques used to bind or drive out spirits. Some ceremonies even involved crafting a clay figurine of the ghost or the god tasked with banishing it, and symbolically breaking it to sever its influence. Imagine waking up from your possession trance and seeing a mini you shattered in a dish beside your bed. Comforting. A mainstream Mesopotamian belief was that spirits could return if burial rites were neglected, especially if someone died violently or far from home. People feared the etimu, a type of ghost that wasn't just sad or confused, but furious. And you did not want to tick off an etimu. They could make you sabotage your crops or haunt your dreams. Some rituals involved digging up improperly buried corpses just to do the rites correctly and stop the haunting. But here's where it gets spicy. Historians still argue whether these exorcisms were truly spiritual or more like early forms of psychosomatic healing. Were people actually purging ghosts or just being soothed by ritual and finally sleeping for the first time in days? Hard to say. But when your child stops convulsing after a scribe mutters Akkadian poetry and waves a feather duster, you don't ask too many questions. Your neighbor swears by crushed carnelian worn on a leather thong, says it vibrates with protective energies. You tried it once and just got a rash. Another woman keeps a dried fishtail under her mattress. Weird, but she hasn't been possessed in years, so who's judging? And not all possessions were viewed as tragic. In rare cases, people claimed to channel divine voices gods like Ishtar or Nabu during ritual trances. There's even a tablet mentioning a priestess who in the middle of ceremony stood up and declared a new prophecy in a voice not her own. She collapsed afterward and forgot everything. Creepy, yes, but also kind of prestigious. At sunset after your exorcism, which involved spitting, chanting, burning cedar, and lightly slapping your feet with a reed, you're feeling better, or maybe just relieved. The Ashipu nods. He leaves a little clay figure by your bedside, a decoy body for any wandering spirit that might return. You're instructed not to touch it, ever, especially not at night. You fall asleep clutching a fistful of salt, another spirit deterrent, and hoping that tomorrow you'll wake up alone in your own head. You open your eyes to the smoky haze of incense this time, in a land far to the east, ancient India. The air hums with the distant clang of temple bells and the occasional sharp bark of street dogs. And once again, you're not feeling quite right. There's a strange pressure in your chest, a jitter in your limbs, and your aunt is already whispering that something has gotten into you. In this world, the spirit realm is layered and complex. You're now dealing with Bhutas Preta and Vitalis, each their own flavor of spiritual trouble. Bhutas are the most common spirits of the dead who didn't get a proper funeral or died in a traumatic way. Pretas are worse tormented, hungry ghosts, bloated and starving, wandering the world, craving offerings or mischief. And Vetalas, those are full-blown body-snatching ghouls who like to roost in corpses and give riddles. Think demonic sphinx meets your worst sleep paralysis nightmare. So what does your family do? They don't call a priest right away. First, they consult the neighborhood wise woman. She squints at you, smells your forehead. Yes, that's a thing. Then cracks an egg into a bowl and watches the yolk slide sideways. Apparently that means you're definitely not alone in there. You're bathed in cold milk smeared with turmeric and made to wear a necklace of tulsi leaves. The family dog who's been barking non-stop at your room gets tied up outside with a red thread. Everyone avoids your shadow just in case. Now the priest arrives, a lean man in saffron robes with a slightly judgmental expression. He sits cross-legged, places a small copper pot on the floor, and starts reciting mantras from the Rig Veda with the kind of intensity that makes your toes curl. One hand holds sacred kusha grass. The other waves a peacock feather dipped in ghee. You are told to chant, too, but you just end up crying and maybe vomiting a little. Possession is rarely graceful. The fire ritual Homa begins. Offerings of clarified butter rice and herbs crackle in the flames. This isn't just about evicting a ghost. It's about purifying space, spirit, and karma. Ancient texts describe detailed blueprints for these rituals, with rules on posture direction and even breath control. Because apparently if you exhale at the wrong moment, the ghost might stay out of spite. Here's a quirky side note. In some rural areas, they believed that possessed people could speak Sanskrit fluently, even if they were illiterate beforehand. Not everyone bought that, but when the village drunk starts quoting Vedic scripture mid-seizure, you at least listen. But scholars still argue whether these possessions were interpreted through religion or social status. Was a lower caste woman possessed more often because she lacked other ways to express trauma or resistance? Or did she truly channel a goddess's rage complete with booming voice and glowing eyes? It depends on whom you ask and how superstitious they are. You try not to flinch as the priest throws black mustard seeds into the fire and shouts something about Agni consuming your impurities. Someone rubs your wrists with sandalwood. Someone else rings a bell near your ear. And just when you think you'll pass out from the smoke and chanting, it stops. Silence. Peace. The pressure inside you lifts like a held breath finally released. The priest gives your family a list of follow-up tasks. Plant a banyan tree, feed a cow. Recite the Gayatri mantra every morning at dawn for 3 weeks. And most importantly, don't let you sleep facing north. Bad spirits love that. Your grandmother gently places a dot of ash between your eyebrows before tucking you in. It's all better now, she whispers, as if that's enough to stop the shadows. You're exhausted, but you manage a smile. The Vitala, if it was ever there, is gone. For now. Your rest doesn't last long because you're ripped straight into another time and place, this time, the ancient Celtic world. Mist coils low over the damp grass. The sky is a moody gray, and there's the ever-present scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic. You're standing in a sacred grove, barefoot, wrapped in rough wool, and already shivering. Possession here isn't always evil. In fact, sometimes it's encouraged. You see in this world, spirits and ancestors and even gods speak through people if they're lucky. Or unlucky. It depends on how messy the possession gets. You're not a priest, but tonight, you're the one chosen by the Fili, a kind of druidic poet-seer, to act as a vessel during the Imbus Forosnai, a trance-inducing ceremony that's supposed to bring knowledge from the spirit world. And you were just trying to mind your own business. Now you're fasting, chewing raw hazelnuts, sacred to wisdom, and lying in a dark cave with a cloth over your face. It's all about the thin places, those eerie locations, where the boundary between this world and the other world wears paper thin. Waterfalls, lonely hilltops, hollow trees, they're all suspect. So is Samhain, the Celtic New Year, when the veil between the living and dead is more curtain than wall. And guess what time it is? Yep. As you lie in the darkness, the Fili chants in Old Irish and your breathing slows. You're supposed to see a vision, hear the voice of the gods, the ancestors, or something else entirely. And while the ritual is sacred, let's be honest, it feels like being slowly microwaved inside your own skull. You suddenly begin to speak words you don't remember learning. Your body shudders, and your voice deepens. You can't tell whether this is divine inspiration, hallucination from hunger, or the worst case of indigestion in European history. The villagers call this gailt, a wild frenzy that can be either holy or dangerous, depending on how poetic your outbursts are. Historically, some Celtic warriors claimed divine possession before battle, entering what the Romans described as a battle madness. They'd strip naked, paint themselves blue with woad, and run screaming into the fray. So yes, if you're foaming at the mouth and shouting prophecies, people don't necessarily assume you need help. They might crown you a seer, but historians still argue whether these trance states were spiritual or performative. Were these people genuinely touched by the other world, or simply playing a socially sanctioned role to cope with trauma or wield authority? Especially when women rarely allowed druidic training were possessed by goddesses of war, like Morrigan, speaking prophecies that terrified even hardened chiefs. Meanwhile, fringe folk stories say a person possessed by a fairy spirit might suddenly crave milk, sleep only during twilight, and start speaking in rhymed riddles. In these cases, the cure might involve iron nails placed under their pillow or tying them to a spinning wheel until the fairy gets dizzy and leaves. Not exactly peer-reviewed, but sure. Back in the cave, you eventually stop shaking. You don't know what you said, but the villagers are wide-eyed and whispering. The Fili bows his head solemnly. Apparently you just warned them not to cross the river after dusk, or the hollow-eyed man will mark their name with mud. No one wants that. Trust me, you're fed warm broth, wrapped in a blanket, and given a talisman made of rowan wood carved with knotwork and soaked in blessed water. You're told to wear it at all times, especially near burial mounds or standing stones. That's where the spirits linger longest. As you settle into sleep by the fire that night, someone murmurs a lullaby in a language no one really remembers. And you can't shake the feeling that your mouth still tastes faintly of hazelnut and old words that weren't yours. The next morning, before you can so much as rinse the cave dust out of your hair, the wind shifts, and so do you. It's time to drift even farther east to ancient China, where possession isn't about demons with red eyes or growling voices. No, here it's subtler, more insidious, and sometimes bureaucratic. You're now in a Han Dynasty village, rubbing the sleep from your eyes beneath the faint glow of a red paper lantern. The air smells like incense and pickled cabbage. A rooster crows like it's trying to expel a ghost of its own, and someone's banging on your door yelling about a spirit that's entered their cousin during a funeral. Classic Wednesday. In this world, spiritual possession is often tied to disharmony, imbalances between yin and yang, body and spirit, the living and the dead. Forget spinning heads and projectile pea soup. Here, a possessed person might just stop speaking, become uncharacteristically joyful, or burst into song in perfect archaic poetry. Frankly, if this happened on the subway today, you'd assume they just had a Bluetooth earpiece. But don't get comfortable. You're not just an innocent bystander. You've been summoned to assist a fangshi, a wandering ritual specialist who deals with hauntings, illnesses, and unfortunately for you, demonic possession. The family thinks their daughter is being controlled by the spirit of a scholar who drowned in a nearby river. Why him? Because she suddenly started quoting obscure legal codes no 12-year-old girl should know. You arrive at the home. Red paper charms hang from every beam. The girl sits silently, fingers twitching in rhythmic patterns. The fangshi begins chanting from the Baopuzi, calling on deities, rattling bronze bells, and waving a sword made of peachwood. And you're holding the copper mirror, because ancient Chinese belief held that spirits feared their own reflection. Which, to be fair, so do most people before coffee. Now here's a mainstream fact. Many ancient Chinese families kept spirit tablets in their homes to appease ancestral ghosts, neglecting rituals or forgetting a death anniversary. That's practically inviting possession. Meanwhile, fringe texts claim you could be possessed not by people, but by elemental forces. Wind spirits or mountain phantoms that took over your body like a really buggy software update. Historians still argue whether these possessions were truly believed to be supernatural, or if they were seen more like a medical condition, especially since Chinese medicine often merged the two. Qi blockages, for instance, could explain spiritual disturbances. The body was a vessel, after all. And if your vessel had a crack in it, boom, there's room for a ghost. You're snapped out of this thought when the girl lets out a sigh and slumps forward. The fangshi nods gravely. He's gone. You're not sure if he means the spirit or your own will to keep doing this. Just as you think it is over, you're handed a charm written in cinnabar ink, folded into a triangle, and told to swallow it with rice wine, just to be safe. You'd like to object, but then you're reminded that the local belief holds once you've been near the possessed spirits might follow you home. Think of it as a haunted group chat you never asked to join. So down the charm goes. It tastes like old pennies and regret. Before you leave, someone ties a red thread around your wrist. It's supposed to protect you from wandering Gui the hungry ghosts. These spirits, legend says, have tiny throats and enormous bellies, forever starving, eternally unsatisfied. Kind of like you after skipping lunch. They're said to roam during the ghost festival, stealing food offerings or even voices. And if you ever dream of one time to book an exorcist, or at least eat more vegetables, as the sun sets, you walk back toward the Temple Inn, listening to the bells of a funeral procession in the distance. You wonder how many ghosts march along beside it, or whether you're one of them now. You wake to the smell of something burning wood herbs and possibly an unlucky goat. This time you're not in a bustling village or incense-filled temple. You're deep in the Sahara, in an oasis settlement where the sun scorches your eyebrows off by noon, and where spirits aren't just real, they're organized. Welcome to the world of North African folk Islam and pre-Islamic Berber traditions, where possession isn't always evil, it might even be scheduled. And you, lucky visitor, have arrived on the night of a Gnawa ritual, where music trance and spirit negotiation are the name of the game. You're ushered into a courtyard, lit by flickering oil lamps. A circle of men plays the krakebs, those metallic castanets that sound like metal teeth, gnashing in rhythm. In the middle, a woman in brightly colored robes twirls eyes half-lidded body, loose and trembling. She's not possessed by accident. This is called a lila, and it's part exorcism, part welcome party for the Meluk, a pantheon of spirits with very specific likes and dislikes. Some demand mint tea, others prefer the color blue. One allegedly insists on Marlboro Reds, but scholars debate whether that's modern adaptation or a very picky gin. Here's the mainstream historical bit. The Gnawa tradition is believed to descend from West African spiritual practices blended with Islamic mysticism and local Berber customs. It's been practiced for centuries, and today it's often tied to music festivals. But don't let the good vibes fool you. This ceremony is serious business. Tonight, the Malam, a spiritual leader and master musician, guides the trance. He chants invocations sometimes in Arabic, sometimes in sub-Saharan dialects. The woman's body shakes more violently now. You're handed a woven fan to cool her face, and you're told not to break the rhythm. Interrupting the beat could offend the spirits. And trust me, you don't want to be on a jinn's bad side. That's how you end up with mysterious fevers, chronic back pain, or losing every sock you own. Fringe tidbit: the Mluk are sometimes classified by color. Blue Mluk are associated with water and healing. Black Mluk might bring protection or warlike frenzy. Historians still argue whether these spirits are entirely metaphorical remnants of older gods or literal jinn adopted into Islamic cosmology, like guests who refuse to leave after dinner. You're told the woman is hosting the spirit of a healer tonight, which is fortunate. The last ritual apparently brought in a protector who got a little too rowdy and broke a chair. But the underlying idea is this possession isn't always a curse. It can be a kind of temporary partnership, like renting your soul to a freelancer who just needs a few hours to vibe. There's even a theory that some possessions are inherited, passed through family lines, like a ghostly heirloom or a very clingy pet. You wonder what happens if you refuse to cooperate. You ask. The drummer laughs. Then they come in your dreams. Or your teeth fall out. Midway through the night, the mood shifts. The Malam pours milk into a bowl, circles it with incense, and recites a prayer. The music slows. The woman sinks to her knees, sweat-soaked and serene. Someone places a scarf over her head. The Mluk has been appeased or bored. Hard to tell. As dawn breaks, people begin to leave quietly, some offering thanks to the spirits, others just hoping their own ailments were noticed and cured by proximity. You, still gripping your borrowed fan, feel both exhausted and oddly charged, like you just ran a marathon through a fog machine. Back in your borrowed tent, someone hangs a tiny silver charm near your pillow. It's shaped like a hand, the Kamsa, a protection symbol that's older than Islam, older than most languages still spoken here. 5 fingers to ward off the evil eye, and whatever else might have followed you through the music. You close your eyes, heartbeat still tapping to the rhythm of the krakebs. Whether or not you believe a spirit entered the courtyard, tonight you're sure something did. And it's definitely not finished with you. The air is different in the Himalayas. Thinner, drier, like the spirits themselves have been distilled down to their sharpest form. You wrap yourself tighter in the yak wool blanket, squatting awkwardly on a mat in a smoky wooden house high above the clouds. You're here for the final stop on your journey through the world's ancient possession avoidance playbook. And trust me, we're ending strong. Tibet, land of lamas, mandalas, and demons that wear your own face. You came looking for wisdom, maybe some incense and philosophical chants. Instead, you're staring at a man in a massive red headdress. His eyes rolled so far back you can see the whites swirling like soup. His voice is not his own. It's deeper, older. Someone or something has arrived. This is an oracle. More specifically, a state-sanctioned oracle. In Tibetan Buddhism, possession isn't just a random haunting. It's institutionalized. Spirits are invited, vetted, and consulted. And when the Dalai Lama needs advice, he doesn't check Twitter. He summons a possessed medium. No big deal. Right now, you're watching a ritual known as a chud ceremony, designed to both attract and appease malicious spirits. Yes, you heard right. Attract. Because how can you banish something you haven't seen yet? Tibetan shamans or Ngakpas invite spirits in with music offerings, and sometimes a reenactment of their own symbolic death. You're sitting in a room with skull drums, thigh-bone trumpets, and monks who are chanting mantras like they're ordering takeout from another dimension. Mainstream historical fact, these practices are deeply embedded in Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. The use of oracles goes back centuries, blending older Bon shamanism with Buddhist ritual. Some oracles, like the famous Nechung oracle, have even advised political decisions. That's right, governments literally took orders from talking ghosts in funny hats. Fringe tidbit. Some lamas in training allegedly practice in charnel grounds. Open-air cemeteries filled with decomposing bodies to confront fear and attachment. One legend says a monk was once possessed by a wrathful deity because he fell asleep under the wrong Bodhi tree after eating butter tea and fermented barley. Historians still argue whether these trance states are divine possession, extreme meditation, or a kind of socially permitted dissociation. Is it faith performance? Something deeper than either. You don't have time to decide. The oracle rises, chanting in a tongue you don't know. His hands paint symbols in the air. A monk circles you with juniper smoke, whispering about shadow beings that attach themselves to weak minds. That might be you. You haven't had coffee in 4 days, and you're pretty sure your aura smells like fear. Suddenly the ritual reaches its climax. Cymbals crash, butter lamps flicker. The oracle screams and collapses. Silence. You're told not to speak for a full minute, to respect what just left the room. When you finally return to the cold, windy path down the mountainside, a small nun presses a bundle of woven fabric into your hands. "Put this under your pillow," she says, "so they don't follow you home." You ask what they means. She smiles. Depends who you offended. By the time you make it back to the village, the sky is bleeding pink over the snowcaps, and your breath fogs in soft clouds. You think of all the ways people across time and place have tried to protect themselves. Amulets, chants, ritual dancing, fermented mare's milk. Was it fear? Or was it belief? You don't know. But tonight, you'll sleep with that fabric bundle under your head, a whisper of incense in your hair, and a newfound respect for the ancient art of please don't possess me, just in case. So take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw loosen. The journey's over for now, and the flickering shadows on the walls are just candlelight. Nothing more. Wherever you are, whether in the mountains or a city apartment, or curled up in bed beside a snoring cat, know that you're safe. Wrapped not in salt circles or sage smoke, but in stories. Let them settle around you like a protective charm stitched with wonder. Spirits or no spirits, your mind can rest easy. Sweet dreams.